The White Sox continue to overvalue Luis Robert Jr., and he's not getting traded anytime soon.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Well, I'm going to dive a little bit more into how Everson Pereira's acquisition is going to be a litmus test to see if hitting director Ryan Fuller and new hitting coach Derek Showman can actually revive formerly highly regarded prospects, after I discuss how eventual owner Justin Ishbia's comments can spark hope for better days when he eventually acquires a controlling interest in the team, and him confirming the Sox are staying in Chicago. But first, let's talk about General Manager Chris Getz's comments yesterday, confirming that Luis Robert Jr. will not be getting traded this offseason, and how that once again shows he's chasing a trade return that's just never going to happen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets used across the app. Download the app today. All right, so Chris Getz spoke with the media yesterday, and when he spoke, he said he's not actively looking to trade anyone on the roster. He specifically also talked about Luis Robert Jr., the $20 million center fielder who's hit under 225 the past two seasons with just 28 home runs during that span, is a player he foresees being on the opening day roster. Now, obviously not a total shock considering he exercised the $20 million option to bring back Luis Robert Jr. and didn't trade him at last July's trade deadline. But again, the latest comments just keep adding up to how this team just keeps overvaluing him, especially the general manager. He just does not believe in the sunk cost or the fact that all you're going to get is pennies on the dollar for him. And the Robert Truthers, you just got to accept that is the trade market. And if you don't accept that, there is a very real possibility you're either going to lose him for a $2 million buyout next year if he gets injured like Yoan Moncada did, or he's going to bolt in free agency, because you remember, he is represented by Scott Boras. Scott Boras does not give extensions. And Scott Boras will find another team that'll say, even if he's 29, hey, I'll give him like a $10 million one-year deal and a change of scenery, and then get back into free agency. That's what Scott Boras does. And again, this general manager has overvalued Luis Robert Jr. so much that he gave him a $5 million raise when he hit 224 overall. Yes, he did have a hot streak after the All-Star break, but guess what? He got hurt again. And the other thing that has just cracked me up about his comments, and the reason why I want to discuss it, is he said that the only way he will make a trade this offseason is if it makes sense for both parties for a trade to take place. And I interpret that as it actually making sense for him. And his sense of Luis Robert Jr.'s trade value is still pursuing that 2023 value that Luis Robert Jr. had when he made the All-Star team, when he was an MVP candidate. But the past two seasons has shown a rapid decline based on his injuries and his lack of production. So here is what Chris Getz said yesterday when asked about Luis Robert Jr., and this is via Scott Merkin, White Sox MLB.com beat reporter. I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube at Scott Merkin. Getz on trade talk involving Luis Robert Jr. Quote, "It's very truthful that we are not shopping him because we are very comfortable having him in a White Sox uniform, knowing what he's capable of doing. Now, if it makes sense for both parties to work out a deal, then so be it. But we're planning on him being in the uniform for us next year." And I don't believe him when he says if it makes sense for both parties in a trade, because the only way he's trading him is if it makes sense to him and he can get this unrealistic white whale trade package. Because this is what the speculation was back around the trade deadline last July. This is from Buster Olney, and I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube at Buster Olney _ESPN. Division rivals are vying for outfielder Luis Robert of the White Sox, with the White Sox apparently resolute in the stance that they'll either receive a trade return, the equivalent of what Robert's potential is, or hang on to him beyond the deadline. The White Sox hold a $20 million option on Robert next season, and they have a tons of payroll flexibility forward, meaning there's really no financial stress in the decision. Chicago doesn't have to dump the contract. A lot of Robert's career has been filled with injury and underwhelming performance, but he's always been viewed as a superstar talent. And that's what he keeps banking. But again, teams like Ken Rosenthal reported back in July were like, teams didn't really want to give this up. This is what Ken Rosenthal wrote in The Athletic back in July. That the White Sox do not want to look foolish if they trade Robert Jr. for a mid-level prospect, only to see him regain his 2023 form with another team. 2023 was the year Robert Jr. made the All-Star team and played like a rising star. Chris Getz even said this back in August per White Sox on SI's Jack Ankeny. Quote, "We really value having Luis Robert being a part of this. We do. Culturally and environmentally, with what Will has done with the staff and the vibes throughout the clubhouse, that was part of the equation and who we were going to move and maintain here. Certainly, there was a lot of interest up until the 5 minutes here. Obviously, we didn't match up, but I'm really excited to have Luis Robert in the lineup come tomorrow. We were open-minded, will remain open-minded when there's opportunities to do what we feel like will really move the needle in a transaction to help our major league club. We went into the trade deadline willing to assess any concept, any offer. It just doesn't meet the mark. It didn't. That's okay because we feel like there's more in the tank for Luis Robert and we witnessed in the last month and the impact it can have on our major league club." End quote. Yet, it's just though been more of the same after he made those quotes, because guess what happened? Luis Robert Jr. finished the season on the injured list. He gets hurt. He goes on these spurts where, yes, these spurts are absolutely fantastic and very talented, and they're hot streaks, but he has so many more droughts at the plate. And we saw it when he was hitting 184 through most of the first half. And I get that it's also the excitement of, well, we're going to have him in the opening day lineup because we're comfortable with him. But they're almost just, I want to be like, it's not just you're comfortable with him. You're comfortable with the idea of holding on to him and just keep taking this risk that eventually could come up bust. And especially since the market has been telling the GM what makes sense to them, but it doesn't fit this high price Chris Getz is looking for. And he's rationalizing it based on potential of a 27-year-old and on the value that he brings to the White Sox, which is the only organization LRJ provides value to because they really don't have a lot of options for the future in the outfield. I mean, Everson Pereira, maybe one, but it's a huge what if, and I'm going to discuss it in the third segment. Brandon Montgomery, he's obviously the team's top prospect, but otherwise, you don't have any true value prospects in the system right now near the big league level where you could say they can replace LRJ's elite defensive ability, which he still has, the ability to run the bases, the ability to crush lefties, the ability to go on a hot streak, and sometimes, have the talent to win a game all by himself. I mean, he did beat Chris Sale in the Atlanta Braves pretty much by himself in 2024. And he did have one game where he pretty much won a game where he hit a home run, like 1 or 2 home runs, and basically caught everything that was hit to him. And he can still hit some home runs, but he's always injured. He gets off to terrible starts. He underperforms, and he stopped hitting a ton of home runs. And again, in terms of the actual value that he's produced in terms of production to dollars per Fangraphs' formula, it's 10.2 million. And if you use that formula as the teams like to use to match up for prospects, they take a player, convert them to $1, and they take a player prospects overall scout grade, sign that $1, how you match that up. You're looking at 145 overall grade prospect. That's probably what would make sense to other teams. But as we were, seeing during the trade deadline, Chris Getz wanted at least a top 10 prospect or major league talent coming back. He's basically viewing, kind of a split between what the value is now and the $39.4 million in value that he produced per Fangraphs in 2023. And I just don't see that 2023 ever coming back. Now with his injuries, now with him still struggling, when he's trading off power for not striking out, because that's one of the things that he has been doing. And now when he can still easily be struck out on a pitch down and in, a pitch down and away, and then just a pitch down in the zone. Because he will at least swing on a down and in and a down and away, and then you just catch him looking. And again, if I'm wrong, great. It means he's had a great season. But if I'm right, and he does end up underachieving or getting hurt, you're basically having him walk away for nothing and paying him $2 million to leave. Well, Justin Ishbia has a deal to purchase controlling interest of the White Sox as soon as 2029, and he spoke about how he views himself as an owner, and possible new ballpark is on the way, and let's discuss his comments after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. So you think the Bulls can ride this good start to an unexpected 50-plus wins this season? Well, that's at plus 490. So you could turn possibly as little as, like, say, $10 into $49 if that does happen. Let's say you're more realistic. I think the Bulls will do what they normally do, and that is have over 40 wins and make the play-in game. Well, you can combine that into a parlay to increase the potential of a better payout if both of those happen. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your podcast. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me, maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my ring content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. Well, Justin Ishbia has finally spoken, and what he said, you feel like it just makes me feel like 2029 cannot come soon enough. The uber wealthy Ishbia talked with the media after having an audience in Rome with the #1 White Sox fan, Pope Leo XIV. He basically was on a trip over to Rome, got an audience, probably said, "Hey, I'm the future owner." I wonder if Leo said, "I really hope Jerry Reinsdorf sells the team to you sooner." But he graced him with a White Sox uniform signed by the 2005 World Series team. And they kind of had a chat about how he hopes the Pope will soon throw out the first pitch at a Sox game in a new ballpark. Basically invited him to throw out the first pitch on opening day whenever the White Sox construct a new ballpark. And the hope for a new stadium isn't just the biggest nugget he shared when it comes to his vision of being the next controlling owner. He also shared how he views himself as the eventual steward of a public trust. That's what he kept saying. He's not an owner, he's a steward. And that might be the biggest indication yet that he actually gets it when it comes to being an owner of a big league team. It isn't something to add to your investment portfolio. It isn't being, owning something that, you just want to make gobs and gobs more money. It's a vanity project. It's a competitive project. It's owning something that not many people can buy. It's owning something other people love and doing your best to make sure people continue to love that by winning. Los Angeles has always loved the Dodgers, but they really love the Dodgers when they're a winner. Think of it that way. And that is why you can't help but get excited that he'll pour his vast financial resources into building a winner, and it sounds like a new ballpark. And he also confirmed that, that dark cloud of the White Sox possibly leaving Chicago, the dark cloud of, well, they could go to Nashville, Jerry meeting with the Nashville mayor, and hey, Justin, he's part owner of a soccer team in Nashville, that type of stuff. And Dave Stewart, he kind of wanted to get that, a team in Nashville, and Jerry had a conversation with him. We don't know what it was, although Tony La Russa said, it was just a conversation about, doing a favor for Tony, but they could leave. And I've always said it's kind of like a dark cloud. Well, that dark cloud is probably parted when he takes over, because he says the team is staying in Chicago. The Athletics' John Greenberg, he wrote this up about Ishbia. But this time it was a little different. For one, the Pope got a Chicago White Sox jersey inscribed with autographs from the 2005 World Series team. More importantly, he got it from the next owner of the franchise, Justin Ishbia. Check that. When Ishbia takes over for Chairman Jerry Reinsdorf sometime down the road, he doesn't want to be called an owner at all. He likes the term steward. Quote, "Jerry's the current steward. I'm the next steward," end quote, he said in a conversation from Rome. The wording is important to him as he thinks about what kind of owner or steward he wants to be. Quote, "You'll never hear me say the word owner of the franchise," he said. "I'm the steward of a community asset. This asset, this team, this franchise belongs to the city of Chicago, and I'm a temporary steward. There'll be somebody after me who will have an opportunity to create memories for our fans in the city of Chicago, end quote. First, though, I wouldn't call Jerry a steward of the Chicago White Sox. I mean, outside of 2005, Jerry's outdated view of owning baseball teams has caused, he's caused seasons such as like 2024, when the team again lost a historic number of games, where again, he had a basically promising young core of players and then put a self-imposed salary cap on that promising young core last decade. And the team just never got over the hump. And even then, they decided to pay the players that they shouldn't have played, in part because they probably wanted to cost certainty to know that, hey, Jerry, we still got some money. Can I spend more money? That's what Rick Hahn did, because he knew probably Jerry was not going to pay the going rate if these guys like Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez did reach their potential. And that turned out to be a very grave mistake. But the key is for Ishbia, if he views himself as a steward, where Jerry views himself as a businessman who loves baseball, so he combined the two things, Ishbia actually has a chance to wake this sleeping giant of a franchise. I mean, again, imagine him pouring in the vast financial resources he has to keep talent that we're hoping turns into superstars like Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teel, and Shane Smith. I mean, imagine that. We don't have to talk in like 6 years about, well, you're going to probably be trading Shane Smith because this organization doesn't pay starting pitchers. Man, they're going to be probably trading Colson Montgomery because they just don't sign guys to contracts over $100 million. And hopefully we can add, stars like Brady Montgomery, Noah Schultz, and Hagen Smith to being superstar players. And then superstar players that the White Sox actually sign to extensions and keep. And then imagine him authorizing huge free agent contracts when generational talent is available on the free agent market, or at least talent that can put you over the top is available, rather than, an owner that laughs at the idea of signing Shohei Ohtani or putting spending restrictions on a contention window where a GM has to go bargain shopping for those final pieces, or saying, well, I want to turn things around quickly after firing that GM like Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, but then cutting payroll and giving Chris Getz absolutely no resources to turn things around quickly. And it's all going to happen in Chicago because Justin Ishbia has cleared up. He doesn't plan on moving the team, and he is planning on building a new ballpark. When remains to be seen, but this is what Greenberg writes. Though Pope Leo didn't ask any detailed questions about Hagen Smith's Arizona Fall League run or the pop in Colson Montgomery's bat, he did listen as Ishbia outlined his vision as a community leader, which includes a shining new baseball stadium he loved for the Pope to visit. Quote, we spoke about Chicago as an international beacon. In my mind, it's a sea of hope, opportunity, and community, and I wanted to share a vision of the new White Sox ballpark, a place I think will create joy for families and kids, for Chicagoans and visitors alike. As part of the conversation, I extended an invitation for him to visit Chicago and throw out the first pitch on an opening day when the ballpark comes to fruition, end quote, Ishbia said. Ishbia said the Pope was receptive to the invitation, but opening day with the Pope throwing out the first pitch, better get in line now to get through security. And wait a second, is Ishbia working behind the scenes to get the Sox a new stadium? This has been a hot topic for years, from Reinsdorf flirting with Nashville to trying to stake his claim to the 78 plot of land south of Roosevelt. No one in the state has been receptive to Reinsdorf's asking for more public money for another stadium. But Ishbia, a billionaire with a fresh reputation in the city, can make this happen, right? Quote, Jerry's the chairman. Jerry has 100% control of what happens with the White Sox, Ishbia said. And so anything about the stadium, you should ask Jerry. But I'll say this, I'm 48, right? And the White Sox lease is up in 4 years after the 2029 season. I can't tell you exactly when, but in my lifetime, we're definitely building a new stadium, whether it's 4 years from now or 34 years from now. I can't tell you when exactly this moment will be, but we'll build a new stadium while I'm the steward of the franchise, end quote. And yes, it will be in Chicago, at least when Ishbia is in charge. Quote, I love Chicago, he said. Put it this way. If I wanted to have a team that was not in my hometown, I probably should have bought the Twins, right? If I wanted to commute, I could have commuted to Minnesota, end quote. So there you go. The White Sox are staying. What venue is to be determined? Some might say right field is still viable, but if Justin wants to use his billions to construct a new stadium that can draw more revenue streams, then hopefully he reinvests in the team, I'm all for it. Well, I briefly spoke about how Everson Pereira's acquisition will be a huge litmus test to see if hitting director Ryan Fuller and new hitting coach Derek Showman can revive a once promising career. GM Chris Getz's recent comments only reinforce that, and I want to discuss that after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So next season, again, wins and losses still won't matter that much. Obviously, you do want to see, though, the win total climb. I would like to see it get into that 70 to 75 win range. But when you get into phase 2 of a rebuild, like I think the White Sox are in right now, internal improvement must come before you start to contend. These guys have got to get better. Now, if they get better in a hurry, great, bonus. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually, you got to take these steps. And that's why you want to be looking now for the internal improvement. As I said, the theme of and the goal of the 2025 season was to just see if a core could develop of young players that you can move forward with. Mission accomplished. Now the goal is, can these players that emerge out of the 2025 season, this core, can they get better? Can they reach their ceilings? Like, for example, can Colson Montgomery be an MVP candidate? Or Kyle Teal, can he be an all-star catcher? Or Edgar Carroll, can he reach his immense potential? Or Shane Smith, can he become a Cy Young contender? Even Shane Burke, can he still be that promising, solid third rotation starter? That type of stuff. And, GM Chris Getz has indicated that that's going to be the theme for next season, because how he's not really entertaining trade offers. I don't think they're going to be signing a lot of, high-priced free agents. I do think they probably will add some bullpen arms and some starting pitchers out of necessity. But it just feels like, again, they want to find guys that still have high ceilings or promising players and see if they can get them better. And even if that would be the guys that they're trying to acquire, like acquiring former top 100 prospect Everson Pereira. That's another indication that the front office, when it comes to their big moves, is to prefer to see if they can revive once promising talent and then make sure the current core that came out of the 2025 season continues to get better. And I talked about it on yesterday's show, but Getz's comments after acquiring Pereira further reinforces the notion that it's going to be a litmus test to see if hitting director Ryan Fuller and new hitting coach Derek Showman can actually accomplish the goal of improving the hitting and actually developing hitters and even salvaging careers. And again, the jury's out. That's why I say it's a litmus test, because you can really only say Fuller deserves credit for Colson Montgomery going from potential bust to potential superstar. Because remember, Colson Montgomery was so bad at AAA last season. He was hitting 189 that they had to pull him from game action and send him to Glendale, Arizona, their spring training facility, to work with Fuller. And it worked. Montgomery goes back to Charlotte, hits much better, gets promoted, and hits 21 homers in 71 games. And also, now I think it was actually someone else that made the recommendation, but either way, under this new player development, they're trying to develop hitting, that type of stuff. I talked about it on past shows of the goal of basically why you have a Ryan Fuller and why they've invested in the technology, because they want to become a hitter-friendly organization that develops hitters, that type of stuff. Somebody helped, obviously, Miguel Vargas make a swing adjustment to get him to go on that late April, May tear. And then, even though he cooled off, he at least became a raised floor player. And that should be celebrated as a success, considering the Dodgers gave up on him. And then, things were looking so bad after he came to the South Side that he was clearly looking like he was going to be a huge bust. But he's at least a raised floor player. But this club has yet to truly revive a player to get him to hit that ceiling. And maybe, Miguel Vargas still does. I don't know. But I think what we got is, I think 2025 is I think that's what he's going to be. He's going to be just a solid, first baseman or third baseman, hits 15 home runs, has a decent on base, decent slug. He's more, you want to look more at his OPS. He'll probably hit around 230, 240, but he'll be a 750 OPS guy. Solid raised floor talent players. And, again, the White Sox need those guys just as much as they need superstars. But the organization seems to think that they can revive guys, because here's what Jim Margulis And James Fegan of SoxMachine.com recently wrote, and since Pereira's early major league results, 147, 227, 215 slash line have been so extreme, a team could only feel good about giving him a longer look if they had tweaks in mind to allow the 24-year-old to make more contact. Getz offered that the White Sox have both, reaffirming that every hitting acquisition is run by Ryan Fuller as a matter of course. He also offered a more reasonable baseline for Pereira's contribution than simply assuming that this is when it clicks for a prospect who had fallen by the wayside of Yankees' plans. Quote, certainly at the very least, you're looking at someone who can hammer lefties and play solid defense, Getz said. He hasn't had a clear runway just because of the landscapes he was coming from. At his floor, we have a strong defender who can play center field and the wings and has power potential just like the two you named. He has a big engine. He has potential. He's got a chance to really bloom into a solid everyday player, end quote. Now, if they're going to use teams giving up on promising young players who have struggled at the big leagues, as a way to basically overcome the limited financial resources that they're going to have to add in free agency, then this organization actually has to pull off reclamation projects. And so far, I haven't seen it. They acquired Vinny Capra after he hit under 100 with the Brewers. And again, the Brewers, who developed talent, didn't work out there. And they brought him in. They gave him playing time. Didn't work out. Joshua Palacios, Nick Maton, Bobby Dahlback, Ryan Noda, all guys who came and went last season. And like Bobby Dahlback was once a promising young player that just fell on hard times. He was barely here. Joshua Palacios had some, upside at one point. Didn't do anything. Dominic Fletcher never panned out after the White Sox traded a younger pitching prospect to get him. That was another example of, hey, here's a guy who's been blocked, doesn't get a runway, just even a regular prospect. Didn't pan out. So this idea of having a runway it actually can be a great way to acquire talented players. But if they fail to take off, then what's the point of trying that path to get the talent? You got to actually be able to do it. And so far they haven't. Now, they feel like they've got the infrastructure now in place with a guy like Ryan Fuller who had success developing hitters in Baltimore. Derek Showman is there to help as the hitting coach and hopefully help this team hit better with runners in scoring position. But he got Ryan Stowers to reach his full potential, and I think that's what they're banking on. And they got guys like Curtis Mead and Pereira. These are guys that were highly regarded prospects at one time. And they've traded for them both from the Rays, coincidentally. So they need Fuller and Showman to turn them into the best versions of themselves at the plate for this path that they're walking on to work, for you to actually feel real comfortable that this rebuild is headed in the right direction. And if they can't, and you get regression and stagnation, or just more of the same bad from Pereira, then it's hard to feel confident that this monumental rebuild can be pulled off. If you get more stagnation and more regression from this young core that emerged, again, troubled times are probably ahead. So that's why I'm actually going to be paying attention to Everson Pereira next season. That's kind of why I'm actually, maybe putting a little bit too much emphasis on him, because I think it's a good litmus test to see, can he be what they think he can be by just making these adjustments that they think that they've identified. And if he can hit home runs in the bigs with these adjustments, that would be a good notion that this organization can develop hitting talent or revive it. But if he continues to barely make contact, let alone drive it, and others like Curtis Mead, they don't amount to much to either, then yeah, I got concerns. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with Elijah Evans of JustBaseball.com. Basically to talk about, kind of give you a different perspective of kind of what's going down with these recent roster moves. And did the White Sox potentially make some mistakes by not protecting certain players from the Rule 5 draft? You can leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube, via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox, or @ToddJDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever you get your audio-only podcast. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.